Hello, this is Haiku going through the Murders at Karlov Manor common set review, going through the multicolored cards, the colorless cards, and the lands of this set. So, starting off with Crowd Control Warden. Unfortunately, this is going to be a theme. So, all of these, the 10, it's a cycle of the guild color pairs. Um, they cost their guild color type plus some colorless mana, and then to flip them up, they cost hybrid mana. So they can technically go into some monocolor decks, but unfortunately, a lot of these cards are just way too overcosted. So they're going to be great in limited, but unfortunately, in constructed, these are not where it's at. Especially because now most black decks are going to be running edicts as a big form of removal, which gets around the big upside of disguise, which gives creatures ward. It's just, yeah, it's all around. Unfortunately, most of these cards are going to be duds for constructed. So yep, this one same dealio, just way too expensive to be relevant and constructed. Dogwalker. This one is a cheaper one, but you don't get the effect. So it's a vanilla 3/1 for 2 different colors of mana, which is very, very difficult to play. And then if you want to cast it for the disguise cost, then you can get some value. This one is one that might see play because you can hit it on 2 mana in an aggressive deck, then it can be your 3-drop. And then on turn 4, you can make more 1/1s, and that's kind of cool. But I don't think there's a home for this deck. You might be able to get by with like a red or a white token deck and use only white mana to flip or red mana to flip, and then you're always putting it down for disguise. But we have Ratcatcher Trainee, which is very similar to this, where it creates 2 1/1s for 3 mana, and then it itself costs 2 mana. And Ratcatcher Trainee is still not really that scene play. So I would put this very similar to that one, but Ratcatcher's Trainee is only red cost in the mana cost, so it's much easier to cast. So yeah, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on Dogwalker. This is the only one that is potentially viable. Fairy Snoop, way too expensive for its effect. If it was on ETB and face up, then we could talk. But the fact that you only get the effect if you paid 3 mana and then another 3 mana for 6 mana total to get the effect, just way too expensive. Gadget Technician, basically a little bit of value with the disguise. So you can cast it face down on 3 and then flip it face up, but it's just not quite good enough. This is going to be excellent in limited, but constructed just not quite. These one body with one card with 2 bodies attached to it isn't quite good enough. Granite Witness, another kind of card that just gets punished too much by the cost. Rakish Scoundrel just doesn't do enough. A 3/3 Death Touch for 4 mana is kind of cool, but the effect of ETB or face up is just not relevant in most games, constructed games. Rift vs. Helion, a big boy, but still not doing enough to make a difference. Sanguine Savior, this might see play in Explorer, because in Historic Pauper we have Breathless Night, which has a lot of synergy, but it has Flying Lifelink and it's a 2/2, which can grow. So this one might see some play. Giving Lifelink to another creature is sort of relevant in some matchups, but yep. So maybe an Explorer. Shady Informant, this is just doesn't do enough. 2 damage to another creature after you traded with after investing basically 7 mana or 5 mana. It's just not good enough. Undercover Crocodile, cool name, cool creature typing, just not quite there. This one, the issue is it's too expensive. If you could get it in and flip it, like even a flip cost of 4 would have been reasonable, because then you could play it on turn 3, flip it on turn 4 if there was no blocks to get a clue. But yeah, this is just really too expensive. Gravestone Strider. So moving on to the colorless cards. We're getting one of these in every set now. Filters, but has that limit only once each turn. You can activate it on the opponent's turn too, which kind of is like mana fixing, but really only limited play. This is kind of cool that they're stacking on some graveyard hate on these other cards, but yeah, too expensive, not repeatable. Already has to be in the graveyard, just too much holding it back from being relevant. Magnifying Glass, we've had this in Paper Pauper already before. It obviously works well in Tron decks that once Wanderer's Ornament got nixed, but now the format's too fast to have this viable, and Arena, it's not going to be viable either. Sanitation Automaton, we're getting more surveil effects. We went through all the colored cards and talked about their surveil. I don't think there's a critical mass or payoffs for surveil decks, but maybe if we get one more surveil, something that cares about surveil, I think we have enough things that surveil that it will finally be viable. Right now, the only card that I can think of is the Demir 2/3 that when you surveil, it gets Death Touch and it gets the Ophidian effect when it deals damage to a player, you draw a card. So that card is nice, but there's not enough cards to build around it. And then the last colors card, Thinking Cap, a cool equipment. Detectives, there's a couple detectives that it's relevant for, and then we have a lot of changelings, but we've had other equipments that are one and they're either free to equip or they get reduced for, or they attach to artificers and other things. So I don't think this detective synergy is going to be worth it. Going on to the lands, Escape Tunnel, kind of a cool Evolving Wilds effect. Obviously, this is just Evolving Wilds, but better. This effect, to sacrifice a land for this effect, even in the ninja deck, to get in once with your ninja, I do not think this is worth it. Yeah. Public Thoroughfare, again, not worth it. It's just slightly better now that you don't have to always pay one. You can tap an artifact, but it's still tapped. It's just not good enough. So overall, the colorless and the lands and the multicolored cards aren't very playable. There might be a couple that see maybe a little bit of play in their respective decks, but overall, they're just kind of quite expensive for constructed play. Limited, these all look like really awesome and fun cards, and it's always nice in limited to have hybrid costs, because then you can play it in either a blue or a green deck. Yeah, so no big standouts for constructed play on these cards. So that was the whole set, Murders at Karlov Manor. I will give a shout out. We are getting the cards on, quote, the list. I hate that they called it the list because it's hard to tell what people are talking about. So you always have to explain that you're talking about the list. The standout card from that is Godolpho Rebirth that we're getting on Arena. Obviously a very strong card. I do not think that red decks, especially ground-based red decks, are going to have a chance against slime decks. But we'll have to see. Slime decks having trample really makes token strategies not very viable, because they're going to be blocking the tokens just fine, and they're going to be putting a clock on the token deck just as easily too. So I'll give my top 10 cards or top cards of Murders at Karlov Manor in the following video, but it's probably pretty obvious what my favorite cards are by my reviews. All right, see you for that video. Bye-bye.